Salutations and welcome to the farm. It's day 7 of our 30 days, 30 questions. One day at a time, I'm answering the questions that were posed to me by Marino's Mysteries. Make sure you go check him out. So the question for the day is, let's just jump right on into it. The question is, what event have you attended that had the most significant impact in your life? That is a really heavy, deep question, isn't it? What event? Do I just have to pick one? I've had so many events that I've attended in my life that have had an impact on me. If I had to narrow it down to one very significant one, I would have to say that the event that really sticks out in my mind as changing, not necessarily changing the course of direction of my life, but it really did have an impact on me. When I was 12 years old, my family and I went to Guatemala, and this was after they had a very significant earthquake. And we actually went up into the jungles of Guatemala to where a missionary had started a small hospital. And we were there for 2 weeks, living in the jungles of Guatemala. There was a building that wasn't quite finished yet, and it was to be an operating room. There were 2 of them. The men slept in one, and the women slept in the other, and we slept on the floor in sleeping bags. And while I was there, this is a pretty long story, so I'll apologize in advance. While I was there, a truck pulled in one day, and they said there was a young girl in the back, and she had been in labor for many hours, and she needed help. The doctor who ran that little hospital, he had gone to another village to deliver a baby, so he wasn't there. So my mother used to be an RN, so they came and they grabbed my mother, and they asked my mother to come check on this girl. So my mother went to the back of the truck, and there was a 15-year-old girl shivering and afraid and in pain. She was laying in the back of that truck. And my mother lifted the blanket to examine her, and all she saw was a little foot. This was going to be a breech baby. So with the help of the nurses who worked there and some of the villagers and other people who were on this trip with us, they helped get the young girl into the delivery room. And this delivery room was just a small room with just a curtain that you would pull back and forth for privacy. There was a table. It wasn't much bigger than a card table, and it was rickety, and a bucket on the floor. The windows were open with, the flies coming in and out, and there was one little medicine cabinet and then just a little, like an examination table up against the wall. And I remember my mother in there with that girl, and I sat on the other side of that curtain. I wasn't allowed in there. I sat on the other side of that curtain, and I listened to my mother and the interpreter speak to this young girl, and my mother fervently trying to save this baby and deliver this baby. And not only was it a difficult situation, but you've got a terrible language barrier. My mother did not speak Spanish. So trying to go through a male interpreter to a 15-year-old female giving birth to her first baby, I imagine must have just been extremely awkward. But my mother reached in and grabbed the other tiny little foot, and she started to, with the contractions, deliver that baby. But there was a problem. Once she delivered the baby to the chest, which now the umbilical cord is exposed, the baby's arms were up above his head. So there was no way she was getting that baby out. The width of the baby with the arms up over his head, my mother couldn't get him out. So my mother pushed that baby back in as far as she could, took a dull pair of bandage scissors, and performed an episiotomy on that little girl with no medication. Reached up with one hand and one by one found the arms and pulled the arms down to the baby's side. Now I want you to imagine how critical this is. That baby's umbilical cord has already been exposed. This baby needs oxygen. Its oxygen supply has now been cut off. My mother's having to work at a rapid pace. I could still hear the 15-year-old girl screaming. My mother was able to reach in and get both arms and pull them down by the baby's side and deliver the baby the rest of the way. The baby was born lifeless. There was no heart rate. There was no heartbeat. There were no respirations. But my mother rushed that baby over to that exam table, and she began CPR on this baby, breathing life into this baby, doing little chest pumps on this baby, praying. I remember listening to her praying to God in between breaths to please let this baby live. Now, not only did my mother want this baby to live because she values life, but we were in a foreign country, and my mother was not licensed to practice medicine. She had been an RN, but she currently wasn't licensed, and she didn't know what the implications would be for her if that baby were to die. She didn't know if she would end up in a Guatemalan jail, and we'd never be able to get her out. So she had a lot going through her head, and she's giving this baby respirations, and she's giving this baby little chest pumps. And I remember sitting on the other side of that curtain listening. And it's like your heart was in your throat and you couldn't even breathe. I just remember just sitting there so quietly. And on the other side of me is the maternity ward. I mean, it's just one big room. And all of these other women are listening to this going on. They're either in labor or they've already had their babies. But you could hear pin drop. It was so quiet. And then all of a sudden, you heard this little baby cry. And then it let out a gusty breath and screamed as it filled its lungs with air. And you could just feel a sense of relief just wash over everybody. And I remember my mother pulling the curtain back and stumbling through that doorway with the curtain pushed aside, blood on her face, tears in her eyes. And she didn't say anything to me. She just looked down at me and just had this most sweetest, humble smile on her face because she knew she had done good. And she walked away. And that had such an impact on my life. My mother was my hero. And if she didn't know how much she was my hero before that point, after that point, she was my hero so much more after that. It was so amazing. And I remember speaking to my mom about just how amazing it was and how that baby lived. And I would go visit the baby and I would visit the mom. I was 12 and she was 15. And it was only a couple days later that, let me back up a minute. Let me tell you. The doctor came back to the hospital. Remember, he had been in another village, delivering a baby. He also delivered a breech baby, and that baby did not make it. But the baby that my mother prayed over and did CPR on and delivered under the most barbaric circumstances, that baby survived. But anyways, 3 days later, there was a young woman who had come in to deliver, and I asked if I could I please witness it? Could I please see a baby being born? And they got permission, and I was able to go in. And not only did I get to see this baby be born, but my mother called me over, and my mother stood behind me. I'm going to get goosebumps. I might even cry. I got to put my coffee down. My mother stood behind me, and she brought her arms forward, and her arms cradled my arms. And we both reached forward, and she assisted me in delivering that baby. I delivered this baby in the jungles of Guatemala when I was 12 years of age, a little boy. She helped me deliver that baby, and we put it up on the mother's stomach. And then the nurses took over and they did all that. And I just remember just how in awe I was. And I think it's a good thing that my mother was supporting me from behind with her arms wrapped around mine. I might have even fallen. I don't know. But again, remember, this is just on an old table with a 5-gallon bucket on the floor to catch everything. And once the nurses got the umbilical cord cut and they took the baby over to the exam table, I was called over and I was able to diaper the baby and dress the baby and swaddle the baby and carry the baby to the mother to present her son for the first time for her to cradle. Goosebumps. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. And I just had such a newfound respect for childbirth and labor. And I'm so thankful that since then, I have been able to witness no less than 5 births. And each one is a miracle. And so that delivery that my mother tended to and saved that baby's life in the jungles of Guatemala is probably the most significant event that had an impact on me. If you've stayed with me this long to listen to my story, and you're still here, I'd love it if you would comment below and share with me what event in your life had a significant impact on you. I'd love to hear about it. You have your own unique story to tell, so I'd love to hear about it. So comment below. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up button and the notification bell so you will get notified every time I put up a video. So that's it for today, day 7. I will see you again tomorrow for day 8 as we answer Marino's Mysteries questions. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.